I once had a guy tell me I was intimidating because I was too independent. He said,
"Men want to feel needed by a woman. It's very intimidating to know she could literally leave you and do well."
Huh, but this made no sense. How can I be dependent on a man if I don't have one? I had no interest in indulging him in this chicken or egg first argument. Besides, I'm aware there are more roles for a woman to fill in a man's life other than damsel or a goji. And then I stumbled across a story of a woman living the independent but romantic maiden's dream. She was happily married, but living separately from her husband. You mean love and freedom? For the woman who doesn't have much experience living alone, who went from living in a home with siblings to a dorm mate on college campus to a roommate paying her half of the rent, the idea of living apart from your spouse may seem frightening, and if you're a traditionalist, counterproductive. I can hear y'all already. Well, why get married? We're getting there. This is for the woman deeply in love, but enjoys clutter-free decor in every room, who wants to maintain her chic lifestyle and relishes her downtime and quiet. And to that I say, girl, sign me up! It's more popular than you may think. According to data from the U.S. Census Bureau, an estimated 4 million married couples are living apart together. Today, we're hearing the story of two of them. You're listening to The Maiden Myth, a podcast that challenges myths about single women. Myths that shape the way society sees us and the way we see ourselves. In this episode, I'm joined by two women, a part of a growing demographic, to challenge the myth, you're too independent. Says who? I got two women saying, no, you're not.
Oh, the tears, the waterfall of like just this feeling of like, oh my God, am I making the biggest mistake of my life? Like, why am I so in desperate need to live away from the person that I love? Like, it just didn't make sense.
I asked, did you find someone? Is that why you're hanging out there every Friday night? And his answer to me was no. And I came back, are you sure?
I'm your host, Sophia Stevens. We'll be back after this quick break. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to The Maiden Myth on iTunes so each week when an episode drops, it will download straight to your device. Are you listening on Spotify? Watching on YouTube? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll never miss an episode. My first guest is Sana Akhand. You may know her from the Tamron Hall show or when she went viral on TikTok on this very subject.
So there's like a whole community that does this, and it's called Living Apart Together, like LAT. So that's what I've been calling it, living apart together with my husband. We were married for 7 years, and then I'm sure you've heard of like the 7-year itch, right?
I literally thought of that when you said 7. When I heard 7, I was like, oh, they had the 7-year itch. The 7-year itch, known as a natural phase between a couple where one or both partners experience boredom or a general decline in happiness. And instead of like fighting with each other.
Yeah, exactly. So we were like, wait, we love hanging out together like this. We thought about it because society makes you think that if you want space from the person you love, there must be something wrong with your relationship. Yeah. And I was like, I thought about it, and like we talked to a counselor, and the counselor's like, you guys love each other. Like there's no problems. Like, why don't you try, just like having different hobbies and activities outside of your marriage? And that's when we started talking about, okay, what would it look like if we did actually kind of date while being married and like have our own 2 different homes so that we could build all of that anticipation and intimacy and excitement of seeing each other again instead of just like being so comfortable around each other, like being in each other's space 24/7 and taking each other for granted.
Many couples can relate to that, but there was also something else motivating Sana.
So I have been on this self-love healing journey, and I've been journaling every day. So one day I was journaling, and one of the prompts were, what is your 13-year-old childhood dream? And I just started writing, and I started thinking about who I was when I was 13 and what my dreams were about. And one of the things were like, I wanted my own company. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted my own apartment in New York City. And I wanted to have friends that I go to brunch with. And I wanted my husband to, well, a boyfriend that was successful to take me out for fancy date nights. And I'm writing all this down, and I started to get kind of really sad because I felt like this was just a dream that I like didn't get to have. And I shared it with my husband, and he was so amazing. He was like, well, I don't want to be the reason that you don't get your dream. And when he said that, I was like, what do you mean? Like, what are we going to do? We're married. We're living together. Like, I can't not live together. And he's like, why not? And I was like, people are going to think we're going to get a divorce. Like, people are going to think we have marriage issues. Like,
Right.
all this stuff. And he's like, that sounds a lot like you care more about what other people think than your own happiness. And I was like, damn, you're right. Like, I guess.
First of all, that just reinforces the fact that you all were thinking of each other, like constantly thinking of the other person's happiness and joy and peace. And wow, what kind of security is that? And so you all began to separate your things. How did that work, Sana?
Yeah, it was really hard, to be honest. I don't know if you know much about attachment styles, but I am anxious. I have severe codependency, which I didn't know until I did this experiment.
Wow.
And I do believe that, the universe puts you in situations to heal.
Yeah.
So when I was apartment hunting, I found a place I really loved, and I told him, and he's like, put in the application. It's going to get taken. Like, New York rental.
Oh, I know.
Market is insane.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, let me just apply. I didn't think about it because I was just like in a hurry to do it. And then once I got approved, that's when it hit me. Like, I got it. Like, that's insane. The boxes came, and when I started packing, the tears, the waterfall of like just this feeling of like, oh my God, am I making the biggest mistake of my life? Like, why am I so in desperate need to live away from the person that I love? Like, it just didn't make sense. I'm like journaling the heck out of this all. And it just like, you know what you were saying earlier about this like gut feeling that you have of something that you have to do?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it felt like a voice from God that it was just like, this is what you have to do. And I did not understand why. I just did it. I was just like letting all the pieces fall into my lap and then choosing to put the puzzle pieces together and figure it out.
So the splitting up, the actual split, how do you do that? Who gets the TV? Doesn't it feel like a divorce? What did that feel like?
He's just too nice. Like, he's like, take whatever you want. I'll get whatever you don't. It was just kind of like, for us, it was all the electronics and all the things that like are fun gadgets. He kind of got them because he loves technology. Yeah. And I'm a very simple girl. And I was just like, I just want the cooking stuff, everything in the kitchen, because I love to cook.
Yeah.
It was easy. I was like, man, if we did get a divorce.
Wow, we would be very amicable. We could do this. No, of course. But I love that he was.
Like, a queen size bed wasn't going to fit in my tiny studio apartment. So
right.
I got my own full size bed and a tinier couch. He took most of the stuff there. But in terms of like the record player, the fun stuff, like the cute little lights that we had up in the house, like all the kitchen stuff, like all that stuff, I got to take all that.
Okay.
I mean, but then I didn't have a TV because I was like thinking I'm gonna like be on this spiritual healing journey and the TV's gonna distract me. And then he came over one day and he's like, "You need a TV." We went to Best Buy. He like bought me a TV.
What are you doing in here? What are you doing in here, babe? But your mindset was all on, I'm growing.
Yeah.
Like, this is a growth for me. I'm not just trying to be away from my man. Like, I'm
Yeah.
finding something here.
I told him this. I was like, we have to make this worth it. There were so many times where I wanted to give up on the whole healing journey and just wanted to move back in with him. But I was like, no, God put me here for a reason. Like, I need to see this through, see it out. It was all the trauma that came out while I was alone in solitude with my own thoughts. And it was just like, oh,
That's what it was. That's what it is.
I needed to heal my soul.
Yeah.
I did hide it for a few months.
Oh, tell us all about that.
Yeah.
Because your mom.
I don't know how courageous I am.
Who did you hide it from? Who did you hide
Everyone.
it from?
Oh my gosh. I like made up a story with my friends that I was like getting an apartment in Upper East Side as a working place. I don't know. I was just so like ashamed, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know what people were going to think. And I'm telling you, like one day I just like posted a TikTok video. I had like 5 followers on TikTok. It was like my safe space to like hide while expressing my truth. And then it blew up and it got over 1 million views. And I was like,
there goes my safe space.
I know.
That
And the
is
Business
hilarious.
Insider does an article on it. And that's when it went on the front page of Yahoo News. And that's when all my friends were like, what?
Are you serious? That's how everyone found out, or at least your friends.
My parents knew. Yeah, I told my parents.
Yeah.
But,
So what happened when you told your parents this?
At first, my dad thought that I am being a child looking for something that doesn't exist. And I said to him, I know what doesn't work. I've seen plenty of unhappy marriages in my life. So even if this doesn't work, worst case scenario, we come back and we live together again and do it how everybody else does it. But to me, it was worth trying to make an ordinary marriage extraordinary and like just living a life that made me feel alive and not just the mundane routines of the day in and day out.
Yeah.
Waiting until I die.
What did your mom think initially?
So,
because you told me about your dad.
Yeah, my mom was very surprising. I thought she would be on my dad's side, but she was like, hell yeah. Like, go live your independent life. Do everything that I wish I could have done.
And that's what Sana did. She moved to a modest studio on the west side of Manhattan, while her husband remained in their 1-bedroom on the east side. Here's how their arrangement would go.
In the beginning, we were like, okay, let's not see each other during the week and only see each other on the weekends so that we can heal this codependency attachment that we have. And then as towards the end, we saw each other during the week because the weather started getting nice. It was summer. We were like, oh, let's do dinner tonight. And then we would go to our own apartments. I would never... So I most of the time went to his place to stay there. He had a 1-bedroom apartment. I had a tiny little studio, and he would walk me home on Sundays, and then we would just do our own thing during the week, and then we would try really hard not to like text each other too much or whatever, but we texted all day, like.
So wait, that was a part of the agreement then, that you all would honor the space.
Yeah, and boundaries too. So we were like, listen, if you have, any if we want to make plans, it's like instead of assuming that the other person's free, ask. Like, oh, are you available on Friday? I want to go here. I want to do this or that. And also another thing we started implementing was no more Friday nights at home. So like if we want to see each other on Friday, it has to be on a date night. Saturday, we were like, all right, let's just like cuddle and hang out all day.
I like that though. So you're making sure that the marriage doesn't fall behind. Like you're not taking care of yourself more than the marriage. It's like an equal amount of catering to yourself, your needs, and then also each other.
It was work. Yep.
Honestly, it sounds almost like more work than living together.
It was 100%. Living together is so easy. Like you're there, you don't have to like, okay, so we've been living together now for a month and easily fell back into the old habit of like working during the day, cuddling on the couch, watching TV until we fall asleep. making dinner. Like, it's just so easy to fall into these like routines of the day to day, which is fun and it's so great. But when you don't intentionally take out quality time together,
Yeah.
that quantity time together will take over.
Yeah.
You're just going to get so used to that time, a lot of time together, that you won't remember that quality does matter over quantity.
Yeah. Wow. That is really good. How did this affect the intimacy? And I'm talking
girl,
about,
it made it.
yeah.
Like, okay, so the power of like getting dressed up for a date night and not knowing what each other look like until you like show up at the restaurant. Like, the times you fall in love with someone are the times you're living apart and you're dating, right? Like, those are the most intimate moments, like the moments that you get butterflies and your heart starts like fluttering and you're like, oh my God, I'm about to see them. Like, and then you like light up from the inside out.
Mystery is exciting, but too much mystery can be a problem for some people. It was time to address the elephant in the room. Did this ever present any trust issues?
I love this question so much because it's the number one thing that people said in the TikTok comments. And my one response to this is, if you worry that your man is going to cheat or your girl is going to cheat because you don't live under the same roof, that's not the right person for you. I'm sorry. It's just, when you get married, that trust is whether you're in the same home or you're 10,000 miles apart.
What was the biggest challenge in this arrangement? The biggest challenge that you had to deal with?
Honestly, just going to sleep alone. After like sleeping next to him for every single night for 7 years, the first night that I slept alone, I was just like lost, confused, a little like, man, this bed is so cold and empty. And then that kind of never really got easier. I don't like it.
So you missed him even more. Did you ever question, like, why am I doing this? Is this silly? Or was it something that even in those moments you knew you had to do?
Every day, like, if I literally have so many journal entries from like those beginning days of like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Like, just like praying to the universe, like, tell me why, like, then I'll do it. But it's just like the change that I saw in myself with my growth and my emotional intelligence and my like ability to observe my emotions and not just like react immediately, and like have that space to like learn that not every single trigger is a cause of your husband's or your partner's actions. I was like, damn, like, this is actually working. Like, all right, let's just stick with it and see what happens.
In that case, it's kind of self-explanatory what the benefit was.
Yeah, I mean, I got to heal all my deepest, darkest trauma and my wounds, and understand that a lot of the stuff I projected onto my husband were my paternal wounds and maternal too. Like, we gotta heal that relationship with our parents. We gotta heal our inner child, so that I do have to say though, like, I've talked to a lot of women about this and they think that you have to heal these before getting into a relationship. Not possible. Absolutely not. Like, having the right partner, you know it's the right partner when they trigger the out of those wounds, because that's how you heal. Like, you're not just gonna know this stuff until that trigger comes out, and then you explore that and you're like, oh, true healing starts with the right partner.
The Maiden Myth podcast appreciates the support of every listener. We enjoy creating content that empowers women. And although our team is modest in size, we're committed to sharing quality content. This, of course, requires more time, effort, and money. If you love what you're hearing and want to hear more, please consider donating to our podcast. No donation is too small. Links are available on this podcast page. You can also make a contribution at themaidenmyth.com. Thank you. Now, back to our show.
My name is Vivian Cook, and I live in North Carolina now. I lived in Baltimore, Maryland as a youngster, grew up, married, and lived in New Jersey and Pennsylvania for most of my adult life.
East Coast.
And I am married, and I have 3 beautiful children.
Mrs. Vivian and her husband just celebrated 46 years of marriage. And for the latter 15 years, they haven't lived under the same roof. I wanted to know, how did this arrangement come to be?
Well, we both were in the military. So I guess you kind of get used to being together and you kind of get used to being apart.
Mm.
And even after my husband left the military, he was in corporate America, and it was kind of the same thing. He would be traveling for his job, and I would be home. And it was exciting to know that, oh, I only have 2 days left and he's going to be home. And it's not something that's very easy to get used to, because you did get a little lonely, and, sometimes the weekends were just me. But then you kind of find an activity, the gym, or some friends that you can kind of hang out with to take care of the empty space.
Whether a partner's time away is attributed to the military, a long-distance job, or even incarceration, navigating their absence is easier with good friends. While her husband was away, Mrs. Vivian often relied on the support her village provided, specifically with her children. Everything revolved around them, and the attention and care for their kids was an area in which they refused to compromise.
Prior to that, the living separately, when I was gone, several times out the year being in the military, I could be gone for 3 to 6 months, and then he's mommy and daddy. And then when he's working in corporate America, his job kind of took him away for 3 to 4 days, sometimes weeks at the time. So you just throw everything out the window, and it's all for the kids. When we actually started the living separately was when the kids were all out of the house and graduated college and everything.
Interesting. Just like Sana's 7-year itch, Mrs. Vivian's arrangement to live separately was introduced during another natural progression of a marriage, this one being the empty nest phase, a stage that leaves parents, typically stay-at-home moms, with grief after their children move out on their own. As life expectancy increases, women are becoming more creative with this stage. For example, in Japan, because married women are confined to traditional gender roles, even when their children are good and grown, a woman's work continues. Why? Their husbands become their sole responsibilities. And if a woman's husband is retired, sis is working all day. They essentially become housemaids. This is another layer of grief. Understandably, many women resent living a life in which they were never allowed to explore their own dreams. This is probably why the practice of Satsukon has gained popularity. It's when married couples separate in order for each spouse to fulfill their individual lifelong dreams or pursue personal passions. This is not a divorce. They are not estranged. Satsukon, usually suggested by women, simply requires the couple to live apart.
The separation came, my mom still lived in North Carolina, and I think all my sisters and brothers had moved back from California, Rochester, New York, and had moved back to North Carolina. And my younger sister lived next door, and then her daughter got sick with Crohn's, And with treatment, she's 2 hours away from Chapel Hill. So, mom, being the mom that she was, she will visit, but she's not moving. And she didn't want to live out of her own home with anyone. So my sister said, I need some help. And at that time, my children were all adults and on their own. So I told George, my husband, that my sister needed help. So I wanted to go. What did he think of it? And he said, well, when my parents were ill, you were there for me. So we're going to do what needs to be done. So I came to North Carolina. He came too, but he said that wasn't a place he really wanted to live because he wasn't a fisherman and it was nothing for him to do. So he decided to stay, and I came, and then I got really comfortable. I wasn't having to shovel any snow.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
I said, this is the best life. So I decided to stay and got a house here. And I mean, he comes when he wants to, and usually he'll come and stay 2 months or 3 months. And I guess he gets tired of doing anything, and then he'll go back to Pennsylvania. And sometimes we meet in New Jersey because my oldest son is there. So we'll meet and camp out for a few days, with children, and just kind of. And half of the time, we just get us a little hotel, and we just camp out together.
Like rendezvous.
Yeah, and then we
Oh
just
my goodness!
visit
Even
the
seeing you get
children.
excited now makes me so happy. That just makes me so happy.
It's all about what you put in the relationship, and what you want out of a relationship.
I asked Mrs. Vivian if trust had ever become an issue with this arrangement. But as it turns out, trust was only a brief issue when they were living together. You see, they used to gather with friends every Friday at the gym, and then they'd hit the bar. Mrs. Vivian worked furthest from the meetup, and so her drive was longer. Eventually, she got burned out and stopped going, but her husband continued to go. Every Friday. She started to feel some kind of way about it. She started to become suspicious, so she confronted him and asked,
did you find someone? Is that why you're hanging out there every Friday night? And his answer to me was no. And I came back, are you sure? But I've never been one to check telephones. I don't check wallets. My thing is, if I can't, me, Vivian, if I can't trust you, then there's no relationship. And, if you feel that we need to have a conversation, you can always get a mediator. There's always a priest or someone in that area available to, hear you out and listen to you. And we did do that twice. And the priest couldn't understand why we were there. And I said, well, he doesn't want to come home. He said, well, you were with them for a while, not coming home. So, I understood. But, after a while, you get tired. And when you work a job all day and then you come home, or you don't come home and you continue on, I was just getting tired of it. And I was never a real drinker. So I really could have just gone to the gym and come home. But I trusted him that he was not in a relationship or looking for a relationship. I was not looking for anyone. And, you have to keep your marriage strong, and you have to look for new and innovative ways to have and be intimate with your partner. And I really thought I was the best. And I always I always look for an adventure, something new and different.
Mrs. Vivian was married in the 70s, a time when new and different consistently disrupted the social norms of gender roles, sexuality, and race. A woman leaving her family for work while her husband remained home playing the role of mom and dad surely provoked whispers of judgment. I invited her to share her experience with that.
Well, I don't think there was judgment. There were questions like, when is your husband moving here? Or, that kind of thing. And my answer always was, you never know what goes on in someone else's house. So I'm happy and he's happy. So that's all that matters.
Period.
Yes.
Let's end that conversation.
Yeah.
And they had to shut it from there.
Yes. Because,
so you didn't even...
You don't want, we could have had a very long conversation, but sometimes when you have a conversation, what I'm saying to you, you're probably going to go tell 2 or 3 neighbors more. And what I just said is not going to get to them in the same tone and the same verbiage that I use. So, everything that you do, everything that goes on in your house is not everybody's business. So sometimes you have to, shut them down right at the point where there are no more questions to be had.
That's wisdom right there. Absolutely. It's really none of their business anyway.
True.
Once again, considering the time period, there was another reason her neighbors may have talked. Your husband is a white man.
Yes.
And so another part of the renegading.
Well, I got so much support from my mother-in-law.
What?
Yes, which in the beginning, when the children first came, being a Black woman, most of us have always worked to support the family, whether there was a husband or no husband. Yep. So she always used to tell me, Vivi, that's what she called me, Vivi, you should stay home with those children. You shouldn't be working. And I'm looking at her because she had 8 children. And when the first one was born, she, came home, raised all 8 of her children as a stay-at-home mom. Wow. And I thought that was wonderful. But I don't think that was in my genes to stay at home. And I've always said, and I've said to my daughter, you have to be very independent in a relationship. You have to know that there's 2 people. But if you are a part of that enterprise and you're putting money in to whether you're living or you're married with someone or you have a partner, you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. So you do not put all, the old folks used to say, you don't put all your eggs in the same basket.
You mentioned, sometimes you miss him being there. You love your independence, but you're like, when he's here, I get so happy. Do you see you both ever living under one roof again? Would you move back up there or would he move down and become a fisherman?
Well, I think now, I think he is more on the verge of coming here because he talks about it a lot. He says that I think we should just sell the house and I should just come here. And I'm like, well, I would like for you to be here, but I'm not going to tell you to come. I want you to come on your own accord. And then I know, he'll be happy because he made the choice. I didn't force or talk him into whatever choice he makes. But now I'm pretty sure because he doesn't get a breakfast every morning when he's by himself. And when he comes home, when I come home in the evening, usually I make a little dinner for us and have a little glass of wine, and the night belongs to us.
Miss Vivian, why don't you just write a book? Will you just teach us? Will you just teach us all the secrets? Will you just teach us all the secrets, please? Just write the book. So now I can give you the last two questions. What has been the biggest challenge of living separately? And then I want to know what has been the biggest benefit.
Well, there have been some challenges because health-wise, now he's not in the very best of health. He's had a lot of skin cancer and skin cancer removed. But the good thing about it is that for me is a challenge because I'm here in North Carolina, and I think about if something should happen or go wrong, it's not that I could be there in 2 hours or whatever. It's at least a 7 to 12-hour drive to get to him. So for me, that is a challenge, and I really, would like for to close the door and close the book on that, and he moves here, and then I feel like I could be a better mate in taking care or helping him through those challenges in sickness and in health.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So then, what has been the biggest benefit?
Well, I've always liked space. I've always liked my space, but it's not the kind of space where I go shop and then I buy something and I have to hide it in the trunk before I can bring it in the house. And I have a few friends that are like that. Well, I think love grows. And I think that when you're apart, you kind of, you love the person more because when you're there, you love him, he knows you love him, he loves you. But when you are apart and then you get together, it's just a feeling that you have that just brings out the best in both of you, in a relationship, even as you get older, there are still things that you learn about each other. There are things that you probably wouldn't have talked about so much in the youthful years, but I think, and this conversation comes up, even in your intimacy, you have to share with that person what you like and what you don't like, or what you want more of, or what is less, and that way, when you are together, the time is well spent, and you benefit from each other's company, and the communication is one of lots, that you can laugh at, you can, be silly with, and I just like I just like having him here, and that's the benefit because in the evening looking at TV, you're alone, and when he's here, we're both snuggled up looking at that TV together.
Yeah. So it's really, you value the time more. It's almost like absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yes.
it becomes sweeter to be with that person. You don't take for granted the time that you have with that person.
Right.
Like you said, oh, he's coming in 2 days. Wait, isn't he there today? Is he on his way?
Yes, he came tonight.
Oh, let me not stay on this phone too long. Thank you to our lovely guest, Mrs.Vivian Cook. Thank you. Sana Akhand. Thank you. For more information about Sana, you can visit her website at sanaakhand.com. It's also listed in this podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to share, rate, and review. We want to hear from you. Here at the Maiden Myth, we replace fallacy with fact, trickery with truth, and assumption with assertion. It seems only right to counter the myth that began our episode with a powerful affirmation. Today's affirmation is, I love myself, and I am in charge of my own happiness. The Maiden Myth podcast is produced by Philosophia Productions, mixed by Sonca Nguyen. The music supervisor is Johnie, Steele. The managing producer, Life Creative Group. Assistant producers, Sarah Benebo and Ronald and Doretta Stevens. Special thanks to Michelle Adewumni and Jennifer Edison. Want more? Join the Maiden Myth community at themaidenmyth.com. You can also find us on every podcast platform, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, where you can leave a comment and join in the conversation.